Well, thank you to Davin and the rest of the Purpose Summit team for having me. I really appreciate the opportunity. Originally, I reached out to Davin maybe, I don't know, in January or February, and just kind of said, hey, it looks like you have a cool thing you guys do with the Purpose Summit. And I said, would love to speak there. And I kind of learned that it doesn't hurt to ask. The worst thing people can say is no. And I actually kind of learned the same thing with my now wife. So we met in political science class. A great college story, meeting in class, and I fell for it pretty quick, right? And for her, it took a little while, though. I'm sure, like most of the other guys in the room, can relate to that. So for her, it took a while, but you know what? It doesn't hurt to ask. But yeah, so thank you again for having me. I really appreciate the opportunity. It is an honor and a privilege. So as you saw in that video, I have a unique story. Faced a couple big ones, so to speak, with the two tragic plane crashes that claimed the lives of my family. There's no replacing my family. I'm gonna have to deal with it for the rest of my life, and I'm married now, which is an incredible blessing. But I miss my family every day. I wish they were here. But I believe I have the opportunity to honor them every single day by how I love my wife, how I chose to respond to adversity as well. So after the first plane crash, I was injured pretty bad, right? I burnt my arms and hands pretty bad, and but not fatal or anything, fortunately. And my dad kind of showed me the rope, showed me what it looks like show me how to respond to adversity when you face an incomprehensible loss like that. I don't know how he did it. I mean, like I said, I'm married now, and he lost his wife. They were married 18 years at that time. Had been together. They were high school sweethearts. Had been together 25. And I can't imagine what it's like to lose a wife, let alone two beautiful children. But he found a way to, keep living his life, and we felt we could honor them every single day by how we, chose to respond. So he kind of showed me how it's done. And as you saw in the video, eventually he was remarried to a lovely woman named Kimberly. He had three kids of our own. We had a great blended family, and that restored some normalcy in my life. And I was working hard on my basketball skills. It got to be pretty good. And then that second plane crash happened 9 days after I accomplished my lifelong goal of committing to Michigan. So I was in the highest of highs when I committed to Michigan that day. I've been working for that my whole life. And then, the unthinkable happened 9 days later. Plane crash again. I was almost killed. I was in a coma for about 2 months, 2.5. And I was blessed to come out of that coma. It was actually a crazy thing here. So traumatic brain injuries are measured on a scale of 1 to 7, 7 being the worst. Levels of 1, 2, and 3 have a pretty good chance of regaining their independence and regaining their ability to live independently, which is great. I'm very grateful that people who suffer injuries are able to regain a lot of their abilities to live. But levels 4, 5, 6, and 7 have decreasingly smaller chances. My traumatic brain injury was the worst level 7 they've ever seen that came out of a coma. So statistically speaking, I shouldn't be alive. In fact, according to an MIT statistician, pretty smart guy, MIT, not a Michigan statistician, but MIT is pretty solid. According to an MIT statistician named Arnold Bennett, he actually studies airplane crashes and kind of how they happen and why they happen, so that we can prevent them in the future, hopefully. And he calculated the odds of surviving a plane crash with at least one fatality is 1 in 3.4 million. 1 in 3.4 million. So that's pretty slim, right? You wouldn't bet on that in Vegas if your odds of winning were 1 in 3.4 million. I wouldn't, at least. So tragically, but fortunately, I survived 2 of those. So again, using my prestigious Michigan education, 1 in 3.4 million times 1 in 3.4 million is 1 in 11 quadrillion, 560 trillion. That's a huge number on the denominator. It's 14 digits, in fact. So if those odds are right, I'm not saying that's the right idea. Maybe they're right. Maybe they're a little high or a little low. I don't exactly know. But if you use just those numbers, statistically speaking, I shouldn't be here. But I feel blessed to be alive and blessed to be in a position to where I can serve others and add value to other people's lives by sharing my story and message about overcoming adversity. So I realized when I was in the hospital in Chicago, I couldn't walk, right? I was in a wheelchair. My legs were broken, but they'd healed at that time, right? I was in a wheelchair because my brain couldn't tell my feet how to put one in front of the other. As my sister Maria said in that video, my head was supported. I couldn't really control movement. I couldn't really do anything. And She couldn't believe that I survived for that. But, you know, I did, by the grace of God, I survived. So as you've seen that picture there on the left, I'm in, you know, that's me in a coma. I was in that state for a couple months, right? And came out of that coma, had a long road to recovery ahead of me. Had to learn how to walk and talk and basically how to live life again. But I made the decision early on. I have no control over the circumstances. No control of them. The plane crashes tragically already happened. Trust me, I wish I could go back. It'll be 10 years since the second one on June 24th. So just here in a few weeks, it'll be 10 years since the second one. And in September, it'll be 18 years since the first one on September 1st. And I wish I could go back and change those events, obviously, but I can't. So I realized early on, I have no control over the circumstances, but I have 100% control of how I choose to respond. Coach Beeline came to see me in the hospital. When I was in a wheelchair, I couldn't walk. I couldn't really do anything. And he told me, Austin, whenever you're able to get to Michigan, I can't wait to have you on my team. I can't wait to coach you, which is an incredible thing. I'll talk about more in a few minutes as well. But I realized I had some work to do to get from where I was in the hospital bed, unable to walk, unable to really do anything independently. I had some work to do to get from that position to playing for Michigan. There are probably some state fans in here. I know we have some Notre Dame people, Michigan, Notre Dame. You know, it's mutual respect. It's only a rivalry because we respect each other, right? But yeah, so one of the best schools in the country, right? And I had some work to do to get from where I was to where I wanted to be. And I realized, yes, it was going to take some hard work. Yes, it was going to take some diligence, some consistent action, not just intensity in the short term, but consistent action over the long term. That's true. You know, I like that definition. Actually, Angela Duckworth, pretty smart lady. I assume most in the room have heard of her. She went to one of the, you could say, one of the Michigans of the East Coast, the University of Pennsylvania. She studied grit and actually a lot of different groups, the cadets at West Point, inner city schools. And her question that she tried to answer was, who is successful here and why? Who is successful here and why? And she found out that it wasn't title, it wasn't IQ, physical health, good looks, good fortune. It was grit, the ability to work hard consistently towards a long-term vision. That's true. I think there's no substitute for hard work, and I'm not going to tell you there is. There's definitely no substitute for it. There's no substitute for putting in the long hours, putting our time in. But for me, on my road to recovery, I realized that, yeah, you know, I'm going to have to work hard. Yes, I'm going to have to, you know, be consistent. I'm going to have, every day is an opportunity. As my grandpa always says, he said, Austin, every day is an opportunity to perform. And I'm sure most in the room have learned a lot of great things from their grandparents as well. I certainly have. And I'm so blessed to have the family that I do, the extended family. But I realized that grit, yeah, it's hard work. Yeah, it's consistent action. But I need something a little bit more specific that I can hold myself accountable to on a daily basis, that I can kind of keep score against myself to make sure I'm giving myself the best chance to achieve my goal of getting to Michigan despite being in the tough situation that I was in at the time. So grit's 4 letters. There's 4 key components to it, I found. But first and foremost, and I think why it's quite fitting to our whole focus of this meeting, this event, grit's driven by our greater purpose. I think we need to have something bigger than ourselves that we're working for, because if we're working just for ourselves, anyone in the world, anyone in the room, anyone, I think it's pretty likely that life's going to present us with adversity, opposition, challenge, trial, tribulation, what have you, that'll probably cause us to give up or give in because we don't have a driving force for why we do what we do, right? Whatever that driving force is, it's different for everyone in the room. And I'm not here to tell you what your driving force should be, whether it's your faith, your family, your friends, your colleagues. Hopefully all of us are some internally driven to be the best that we can be. But I think having that driving force is very important, because that'll drive us to not only do what it takes to overcome, I think it'll drive us to do what it takes to find a way to thrive in the midst of it. And that wasn't my goal. So by the grace of God, I survived, right? You know, I gave you the odds, according to that statistician. If it was a Michigan statistician, maybe those odds would be a little more credible. But the odds were slim, right? However, whatever the number actually is, it's slim, right? And my goal wasn't, by the grace of God, I survived. But my goal wasn't just to survive, though. My goal wasn't just to survive. My goal was to find a way to thrive in the midst of it. And for me, I want to find a way to thrive in the midst of whatever challenge, whatever adversity I go through. So I found that being driven by that greater purpose is essential because, for me, when I was in the hospital and I couldn't walk and I was relearning, I felt that how I responded to the adversity that I faced was a direct reflection of my family in heaven. And how could I not give everything I had to the process when I remember that, right? My family wasn't, tragically they aren't here. Thank you. So tragically my family's not here, but they're still impacting me to this day. And, on that road to recovery, I felt that how I responded was it was a direct reflection of my family. And I think if we remember that, or if we remember that greater purpose, whatever it is for you that drives you, I'm not here to tell you what it should be, as I said. I just think it's important to figure out what that is, because that'll drive us to do what it takes, not only to overcome, but I think it'll drive us to do what it takes to find a way to thrive in the midst of it. So when you have that greater purpose, that driving force, it'll drive the 4 key components of grit. So as an acronym, the G stands for the growth mindset. The growth mindset believes that every setback, every failure, every adversity is really an opportunity. The growth mindset believes that even when we inevitably fail or fall short of a goal for a quarter or a year, that failure is not a permanent condition. We can find a way to grow from it. We can find a way to get better from it. It's probably not going to be the event itself that will cause us to grow. My thoughts and prayers out to anyone whose family members have been impacted directly by COVID-19. COVID-19, it's the real deal. A lot of people have been affected. Everyone in the world has been impacted. Many people have lost loved ones or family members close to them. So my condolences again if anyone in the room has. But I believe we can find ways to grow from how COVID-19 has forced us to respond. I don't think learning how to win in a different way is a bad thing. So at Michigan, Coach Beeline, he would always have the best scouting reports. Every detail. If we lost games, which he obviously did, it was mainly because we didn't execute the game plan that coach prepared. He very rarely, I don't think ever, made a scouting report that wasn't totally complete. We could basically plan for everything that we'd seen the other teams do in the past on film and things like that, right? But the other teams would always do something in the games that we didn't expect. They would always do something in the games that we didn't expect. So, and when we'd have to adjust and adapt on the fly. And whenever we didn't lose many games, as I said, but whenever we would, Coach B would always come in the locker room and say, guys, we didn't execute the game plan. Here's the handful of things we didn't do that we should have done. But we're going to watch the film of the game and we're going to find a way to get better from it. We're going to watch the film of the game and we're going to find a way to get better from it. I think, metaphorically speaking, I think we can all watch the film of whatever we go through, whether it's COVID-19, a challenging year, a challenging week at the office, a challenging circumstance, whatever it may be. I think we can all watch the film, review what happened, and find a way to get better from it. So for me, on my journey, I think it's very important to, like I said before, there's no substitute for hard work. A lot of people will say, when you face a huge challenge, just keep your head down, keep plugging away. Just keep working hard. I totally agree with that, 100%. But I think it's also very important to be alert enough to the lessons that can be learned from it. Lessons that can be learned on the journey, right? Because for me, I faced a couple of big ones, especially after the second one. I had a long road to recovery, but why wouldn't I? That was a great time to learn lessons from overcoming that are going to help me in the future as well, because that wasn't going to be the last challenge that I ever face. So why wouldn't I learn lessons from why wouldn't we learn lessons from what we're currently going through that will be advantageous to us in the future? So I think just having that growth mindset is so important. It's a to take away from the actual event or circumstance, but there's always positive to take away from how we choose to respond. So I think just having that growth mindset, if we have that growth mindset, that'll enable us to turn the negatives into positives. Because why wouldn't we want to turn anything we go through into a positive, right? what happened to me was terrible. It is what it is. But if I can shift my focus from the event to the opportunity to learn, it doesn't ignore the reality of the event, but it's just a decision to focus on what can I learn from it. So when we have the growth mindset, I believe it'll drive us to make the decision to be resilient. That's the R. The R is the decision to be resilient. And if we make the decision to be resilient, it's a decision to focus on the things that we control. How we choose to respond to adversity, our attitude, our work ethic, how we go about our business every day, right? We can't control our circumstances, as I said. It's not going to be the event that'll cause us to grow. It's not going to be the event that'll be advantageous to us. But I believe we can grow from how we're forced to respond, as I mentioned. And so if I realize I'm in the hospital in Chicago, I can't walk, I can't talk, and coach comes to see me and tells me he can't wait to have me on his team, I realize I'm going to have to make that decision to be resilient. I'm going to have to make that decision to prioritize my response to my circumstances rather than dwelling on the circumstances that I can't control. And by having that greater purpose, it'll drive us to make that decision because it's not easy, right? The cadet prayer at West Point said, Lord, help me choose something like this, maybe not verbatim, but it said, Lord, help me choose the more difficult right over the easier wrong. Help me choose the more difficult right over the easier wrong. I prayed that I would choose the more difficult right over the easier wrong because overcoming adversity, being resilient, it's hard. It's not easy. It'd be nice if it was, but it's not. Like responding to any form of adversity, it's not easy. And so I prayed that, God or, whatever you all believe, I prayed that I would be able to make that difficult decision to focus on how I responded. Because I knew for a fact that, you know what, I don't have a game plan. I mean, I have a game plan of what I think I need to do to get to Michigan, but I'm just going to have to find a way. So, God, I pray that you just help me make that tough decision and help me decide to find a way to thrive in the midst of this inconvenient circumstance, in the midst of this tragic circumstance. And what I also learned about being resilient, it's a great opportunity to lead others by example. One of the most powerful ways to lead. I wasn't in position, I've never led people like a team of like an organization or anything. I mean, I was playing sports, but I think the best way to lead is by example. And I realized that an example is always better than an opinion, right? An example is always better than an opinion. Because if I wasn't resilient, if I didn't overcome my adversity, how could I expect other people to, right? So I think every day is an opportunity to inspire someone, and every day is an opportunity to empower someone. You never know what a simple example, what a big impact that could make for someone. Other people are always watching, whether it's other people in your organization, colleagues, peers, friends. People are always watching, especially nowadays with the technology's made everything a lot smaller. People are probably going to get things on their Snap story or Instagram now or whatever. I don't have either, but I think it's easy for people to get things like to record things and like that could stick with them because people are paying attention. So I think just making that decision to be resilient, to focus on the things that we control, and just to prioritize our response to adversity rather than dwelling on the adversity itself. And one last thing about resilience, as I mentioned, you never know how it's going to inspire or impact someone else. We got to acknowledge the fact that not only is every day an opportunity, but I think for the other people in our life, we respond to adversity to benefit ourselves. But if we think of others and think of how our response could impact them, I think for me, at least, I was much more willing to do what it takes because it wasn't only for me. I was responding to adversity for my benefit. I was the one who was directly impacted and injured. But I had other people in my life who were counting on me and watching me, and I wanted to inspire them because every day is an opportunity to inspire someone and empower. So the third letter of grit is I, and I is integrity. Of course, the third letter is I, and I to me stands for integrity. And we all know integrity is about about being honest, doing the right thing, and no one is looking. Of course, that's true. Going about it just the right way. I'm treating people the right way. That's very true. My school motto at the high school I went to in Fort Wayne, well, I went there my whole life, K through 12. It was integritas in omnibus. It's Latin I didn't take Latin. But it's integrity in all things, right? We should always have integrity. A lot of companies have that written on the wall as a key cultural principle, right? But I think not only is integrity about doing the right thing and no one is looking, I think it's also about following through on our commitments, especially when our circumstances change. Coach Beeline offered me a scholarship when I was playing at a pretty high level, as you saw in that video. I had to get a lot better. I was only a sophomore. I was 16 years old. So I had to get a lot better to be able to play to help the team at Michigan. He saw some potential in me, right? The second plane crash happened 9 days later. I was almost killed. I was in a coma for 2 months and came out of it, couldn't walk, right? He comes to see me in the hospital when I was in a wheelchair. My legs were broken, but they'd healed by that time. I was in a wheelchair because my brain couldn't tell my feet to put one in front of the other. I couldn't walk, right? I just committed to play at one of the best schools in the country. Sorry if there's any Notre Dame or Michigan State or whoever, right? But Michigan's one of the best schools, best programs in the country. Coach Howard's doing great things there now. Obviously, big shoes to fill with after Coach Beeline, but he's the best guy for the job. So, Coach recruited some great players. The likes of Tim Hardaway Jr., Duncan Robinson, Trey Burke, Karis LeVert, Mo Wagner, guys who signed big NBA contracts, huge contracts. Good for them. And they were really good in college. I couldn't walk. You could say that he didn't have any business, worrying about me. He had other more important things to worry about, more important players to worry about, and other things to do. And in the grand scheme of things, it maybe wouldn't have been that big of a deal. There's a lot of players that actually get hurt after they commit or when they're at school, they get hurt and their career ends. I think in football it's more common. A lot of times, they'll lose their scholarship because they can't play. But Coach said, Austin, this is a no-brainer. As long as we're both still here, my word's good. It doesn't matter the circumstances. We committed to each other on June 15th, and my commitment to you wasn't solely contingent based on what you could do for me. Of course, that's what Coach Behind expects. When he recruits a player and offers them a scholarship, he expects them to be able to, follow through on their side of the commitment and contribute to the team and help them win. But mine were obviously very unique circumstances, and Coach's follow-through, though, didn't waver even though the circumstances drastically changed. And I think about that from an organizational, cultural perspective. If we can have 100% of the team members who make it a priority to follow through on 100% of what we commit to 100% of the time, I can't do anything but make a positive impact. Can't do anything but help us win in the long run. Maybe not win by tomorrow or next week, but over the long term, it's going to make a big difference, I think, right? And if stay in the work world today, so if there's 350 million people in America, maybe there's 250 million people in the work world. I have no idea what the numbers actually are, but just say 250 million people in the work world. I would guess that every person every day makes a commitment of some kind. So you could argue there's roughly 250 million commitments made every day, or whatever the work world number is, however many people there are. Most people commit to something every single day, right? Tell someone they're going to do something, tell us whatever, maybe it's a big commitment or it's a small one. But I guarantee you, there's not 200 plus million, whatever that number is, there's not that same number of commitments followed through on every single day, especially when there's a drastic change in circumstance, right? And not even a drastic change, any change in circumstance. So I think about it, if making a commitment is a common thing, a lot of people across the country do it. If making a commitment is a common thing, but following through on every commitment, especially when there's a change in circumstance, that's an uncommon thing. I believe following through on a commitment when there's a change in circumstance is doing a common thing in an uncommon way. I believe it's doing a common thing in an uncommon way. And the result of doing the common things in an uncommon way is we're going to leave people in places a little better than we found them. Coach Beeline definitely left me better than he found me. I can tell you 100%. I mean, Michigan changed the course of my life forever. Yes, I got to be a part of some great teams. Got a great education. Met the girl of my dreams. Completely outkicked my coverage. Might have given a new definition of the term, actually. Michigan changed the course of my life forever. And Coach definitely left me better than he found me. My dad was one of the most incredible men I've ever, had the privilege of knowing. And, tragically he's gone, but he's still impacting me to this day. And one thing that my dad did so well, better than anyone I've ever seen, is he did those common things in an uncommon way. And he left every person in every place a little better than he found it. So we'd go to McDonald's for breakfast a couple days a week on the way to school, usually on Wednesdays and Fridays from about 2006 to 2010 before I could drive myself to school. And that cashier at the McDonald's on DuPont Road in Fort Wayne, Indiana, a family friend told me last summer, actually, Josiah was his name. He was at my parents' funeral after my dad passed away. My dad's second mom passed away in 2011. Josiah didn't go there to support my dad. My dad was tragically already gone. Josiah went there for him because my dad made him feel appreciated, valued, like he was important, because he was. Like I said, I should have been paying more attention to it at the time, but something my dad did left Josiah a little better than he found him. He did a common thing: go to McDonald's, get your coffee, get your breakfast sandwich in an uncommon way. And the result of doing the common things in an uncommon way is we're going to leave people in places a little better than we found them. So the last letter of Grit's T, and T to me is the team first mentality. I think we should always think about the team first. We should train ourselves to think we before me. We should remember that every person on every team has a role, and that role is very important. Otherwise, that person probably wouldn't be on the team, right? So I couldn't play at Michigan. I would have loved to be able to play in the big games. I scored 1 point in 4 years. Coach was kind enough to put me in a couple of games my freshman year. I got fouled one time and went to the free throw line, shot a couple of free throws. Actually, I got fouled on 3, and I missed 2, so I was 1 of 3. That's not really anything to be proud of. So I'm probably the all-time lowest. Not only am I the lowest scoring full scholarship athlete in Michigan basketball history, but I also have the lowest free throw percentage of a full scholarship athlete in Michigan basketball history. But hey, you know what? I guess if you look at it this way, 33% is better than 0%. I'm glad I made 1, right? But so if what I could do, though, I couldn't play in the big games. I would have loved to, but I couldn't play. But if what I could do was shag balls in practice, unload luggage on road trips from the bus to the plane, and from the plane to the bus when we got to where we were going, and from the bus to the hotel, and if what I could do was encourage my teammates, help with drills and practice, bring positive energy to the gym every day, if that's what I could do, it's what I could do, right? I would have loved to be able to play in the big games, right? Score, rebound, play defense, do all that kind of stuff, be on ESPN, Big Ten Network would have been so cool. But hey, I couldn't. So I couldn't control my circumstances. I wasn't going to, just wishing I could play, I wasn't going to do anything. And that wasn't going to make me impact the team more. But if how I could impact the team was doing those little things, bringing energy, helping with luggage, helping with drills. That takes no talent, no title, doesn't matter who you are. We can all make the decision to think about the team first. And a lot of it, not everyone's going to have that star role that I wish I had. But I think we have an obligation to the team to make the effort to be all-stars in our role, right? So like if you think about, I don't know if anybody here knows like the Bulls teams from the 90s, right? So there was obviously Michael Jordan, who was a stud. Maybe some people saw the Last Dance documentary, or it came out at a good time when everything was shut down, right? So there's Michael Jordan, Scottie Pippen, the 2 studs, Dennis Rodman too. But then there's guys like Steve Kerr, John Paxson, Phil Jackson was the head coach. But then there's guys in the supporting cast that didn't get as much of the credit, didn't get as much recognition, but they had a role on the team too. And I think if we just make that decision to think about the team first and remember that every person on every team has a role, and that role is very important, I think we'll do what we can to fill our role to the best of our ability. And it's kind of like my wife when you could argue, so I was in the supporting cast at Michigan. That's fine, but now I'm actually even in more of the supporting cast. To my wife, she's the star of the show. I listen and I follow directions, and I execute. I figured out. Yes, we're only 3 years into marriage. Hopefully, 3 on the way to 63. But I figured out there's a very simple formula. Maybe some of the husbands in the room could maybe give me some more advice on this. But if marriage, it's tough for some reasons for other people. But I feel like it's pretty simple. If I listen, if I follow directions, and I execute, right? I'd like to think things are going to work out for me. So, but yeah, thank you so much for the opportunity. So that's grit to me. Grit's going to help us overcome and thrive in the midst of whatever we go through. We got to be driven by that greater purpose first and foremost. We need to be working for something bigger than ourselves, whether it's your team, your family, coworkers, faith, whatever it is. I think when we have that greater purpose, that driving force, it'll drive the 4 key components of grit, which to me, the G is the growth mindset, which views adversity as opportunity. The R is the decision to be resilient and focus on the things that we control. The I is integrity, and we always follow through on our commitments, especially when there's a change in circumstance. Lastly, to tease the team first mentality. And I noticed the slide there. Sorry, I didn't really pay attention to the slides. But that picture, so that was a post that Big Ten Network posted on Twitter of about the free throw that I made. They said something like, what a great story, really cool, what awesome overcame and stuff like that. And then Coach Beeline replied to that tweet and said, one of the best days of my life. By the way, for anyone who did not get to see Austin play in high school, he was terrific. I thought he was going to be a 3 or 4 year starter for Michigan, but he gave us more than that with his attitude. He was a huge part of our success. I scored 1 point in 4 years. And Coach B said he was a huge part of our success by bringing positive attitude, positive energy, right? Those little things. The little things make a big difference. And maybe that equates to 1 or 2 points if you could translate that to a game. I don't know. But a lot of games in college basketball, in the Big Ten especially, were decided by 1 point or one possession at least. So the little things make a big difference. Even if we don't recognize it, you never know what a big impact we're going to make. So thank you very much for the opportunity. I really appreciate it. Thank you so much.